Hello everyone and welcome back to the Parks Trust and Open University joint podcast. Today I am joined by Dr. Jitka Vseteckova, who is a senior lecturer in health and social care at the Open University, and Dr. Abi Methley, who's a senior clinical psychologist. Today's topic for discussion is memory. Dr. Jitka and Dr. Abi are going to help us understand what we need to know about memory and how to care for our memory going into later life. So Jitka, can you tell us a bit about what happens to our brains as we get older and how this affects memory?
Thank you, Ellie. So we know that aging brings about age-related decline to all our organs, and that includes our brain. Our brain is, in a sense, a central computer where everything that is happening in our bodies and minds gets processed. You can read more about aging brain in one of our articles that we published with Open Learn, or listen to another podcast of ours that is looking into aging brain more specifically. We do not know exactly, though, how our organs, that including the brain, will be affected by aging and which might be affected first. So this makes predicting age-related decline a very difficult task within one individual, and especially when it comes to aging populations and more globally. So in this podcast today, we will focus a little bit more on how our brain functions might be affected as we age. And here we often talk about physiological and pathological aging. Physiological, normal aging, in other words, results usually in mild continuous decline of functions and skills and capacities, and is often due to wear and tear of all the systems throughout our lifespan. Pathological aging is being often referred to as speeded up aging, where due to some missing components, which could be missing self-repair functions, quickly advancing changes in neurotransmitters and neurons, significantly increased presence of plaques and tangles in the brain, or could be chronic inflammations. So due to all those possible reasons, our brain might be affected by pathological aging, which would mean much faster decline of our brain functions. Example could be a neurodegenerative condition such as Alzheimer's disease and or other types of dementia that affects global cognitive functions, impairs memory, language, thinking, and reasoning, and interferes substantially with our daily living capacity and skills. Physiological aging is also called normal aging, result from natural wear and tear, as we said, and affect our brain directly and indirectly. As indirect age-related changes, we have, for example, slowed down basic metabolism and age-related changes on our cardiovascular system, which includes blood circulation. That includes changes in blood flow to the brain as arteries might get narrower. As all slows down with aging, we may see more issues also resulting from our other organs slowing down their functions, such as liver and kidney, that contribute to metabolizing and eliminating medication, drugs we take from our organism to prevent a toxic buildup and a drug-to-drug interaction. So when liver and kidney don't work optimally, the toxicity building up from medication in our bodies will be affecting all organs, including the brain, and this may result in older people feeling dizzy, wobbly, sedated, not keen to go out and about, meet with other people, go outdoors walking, etc. All these being immensely stimulating for our body and our brain. So lacking on exercise, lacking on meeting people, lacking on talking to people and doing, for example, outdoors walks could really further slow down our metabolism and further kind of propel the age-related changes to our brain. And as we said several times in our previous podcasts, the lack of exercise really contributes even more to the overall sedation and inactivity, leading to lack of stimulation and further decrease in function. And this is a function of our brain, but also a function of our other organs and tissues, such as, for example, muscles. Direct age-related changes on our brain come from the natural wear and tear and affect in large proportions our memory, how we store and retrieve the information, as well as our attention span. In other words, if we do not concentrate on the new information being shared, spoken, read, and the capacity to focus naturally declines with aging unless stimulated or exercise, we have even more of a difficulty to retrieve this information later, to kind of memorize it and to retrieve it from our memory. So the memory loss we may fear in relation to naturally occurring age-related changes is usually created by decline in the storing and retrieval of the new information, as well as the decline in attention span where the information is being shared. Abi will now tell us more about the cognitive pyramid and how our brain works with it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jitka. So when people talk about changes to their memory, they often talk as if memory is one distinct thing and the only thing that influences our cognition, which is what we call our thinking skills. We hear this commonly when people are talking about their memory in everyday conversation, and they say things like, oh, I've got the memory of a goldfish. But what many people do not appreciate is that memory is just one specific part of a much broader set of cognitive thinking. And this is influenced and interacts with lots of other types of cognitive functioning and thinking. So to make this easier to understand, we often frame this as a cognitive pyramid, as you can hopefully see. And what this means is that in order for information from our senses, so sights, sounds, touch, taste, and smell, to become a memory, it first has to be processed in several ways. Initially, we must be in a position to process information before it becomes lost to us. And you'll notice yourself that if you're ever tired, unwell, or in pain, it can feel as if it takes a lot longer to take information in and make sense of it. And this is what we'd call your information processing speed. Linked to this, if we want to make sense of information, we must first to attend to it, which means give it the necessary attention. And this is very tricky to do when you're trying to divide your attention, for example, by doing multiple things at once. We live very busy lives now where we're often having a conversation whilst typing, with the radio or the TV on in the background. So we're rarely focusing on just one thing at a time anymore. Once information has been processed and attended to, then we're in a position where it can become stored as a memory. And memory covers lots of different areas, including memory for visual information, such as pictures, or verbal information, such as words. And even within this, there are lots more types of memory, such as short-term memory or delayed memory for longer-term information. And where people have a memory difficulty, it can be within any of these specific areas or a mixture of them. But often when people say they have a memory problem, they may actually be referring to an attention or an information processing difficulty instead. Now, we can test this by seeing if they can recognize information at a later stage, but not recall it without hints, which suggests that information is stored in the memory but tricky to retrieve, or if people can recall it without any prompts, suggesting that the information is both stored and easy to retrieve. If the person cannot recall the information with any number of prompts, that suggests that the information was never actually turned into a memory. And knowing this is really helpful for helping us work out which strategies we can recommend. Another really important aspect of cognitive functioning, which is often confused with memory, is something called executive functioning. Now, this is just a fancy name for a part of cognition that's responsible for planning, organizing, sequencing, and problem solving. So someone may be able to recognize and recall information perfectly well. That is, they don't have a memory problem, but they may struggle to use this information to make decisions, complete tasks, or plan. And you can think of this bit as like the conductor of an orchestra. It needs to have oversight and coordinate many different functions at the same time. Now, obviously, many people have difficulties across multiple areas of their cognitive and thinking skills, but it's important that we know which ones so that we can match strategies accordingly. And it's often a much more complex picture than simply a memory difficulty. However, the great news is that being outdoors can help address lots of different areas of cognition. So we've spoken in previous blogs and podcasts about how stimulation is really important for everyone in maximising our cognitive functioning. A previous podcast has spoken about mindfulness outdoors and how to pay attention to the information coming from our senses. By taking the time to really slow down and focus on one thing at a time, we maximise the chance of paying attention to our experiences and surroundings, and we give ourselves the best chance to process and store information effectively. You can also use outdoor settings as a chance to practice more general cognitive techniques. For example, can you spot different categories of objects? And can you switch between categories, such as going from an animal to a flower, then an animal again? This psychological flexibility is an important part of executive functioning, that conductor of the orchestra. You may want to notice 10 items and try out different strategies to remember them over the course of a walk. So an example here would be a mnemonic, and this is a tool that helps us remember certain facts or large amounts of information. So one example is the mnemonic, "My very educated mother just served us noodles." And this, although it sounds a bit silly, helps us remember the planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Another strategy is to use location to jog memory. So you could try and remember one item per section of the park, and then replay the route in your mind to recall these items. If this is a bit tricky, then you can use someone with you to support you by what we call cueing. This is where they provide the first letter of the word, and this can then prompt you to remember the rest. But as with all good things, this type of memory practice should be fun and not based on being self-critical, because what we know is that where people feel criticised or where they criticise themselves, this actually makes remembering things much harder. So it's key to take these strategies and go have some fun outside with them.
Thank you, Abi. So as we just said, having fun outside is really important. And there goes also a regular exercise outdoors that brings immense benefits that have impact on the direct as well as indirect causes of declining memory. So on the physiological level, exercises regularly bring slightly increased basic metabolic rate and improves blood flow in the whole body, including our brain. And this is great, as brain that gets regular blood flow, sufficiently oxygenated, full of oxygen, performs more optimally when it comes to attention span, as well as processing, storing, and retrieving the information we need. Another benefit worth mentioning is being mindful as we, for example, walk outdoors and focus more, paying more attention on sounds, sights, smells, and nature around us, just as Abi mentioned already. You can also read more about mindfulness and common myths of mindfulness and about walking and staying mindful on Open Learn, where we have authored several articles, and these articles contain the podcast as well, so you can read and hear more about it. We have also made more articles about benefits of outdoors for people with or without dementia and about benefits of staying outdoors in general. So there are many articles and podcasts that are now available to you to read or listen to. And there is a lot also that can be found locally. And this is, for example, what the Parks Trust offers. And Ellie will tell us more about it.
Yes, thank you, Jitka. So if you're based in Milton Keynes or just around Milton Keynes, we offer many different activities that can help you to keep your memory going. Some of our activities are exercise-based, for example, our Discovery Strolls, which are a programme of monthly guided walks that enable people of all abilities to get out and about and get familiar with their local parks. We also offer other walking schemes, such as Women's Walking Network, and this is a monthly walking programme for women to explore Milton Keynes' parks together. The group chat along the way, and it's a great chance to get familiar with new areas. Perhaps you could try some of Abi's mnemonic methods on one of these walks. Aside from exercise, we run other educational activities, and these can be a great way to test your memory, as you will be learning something new which you can then recap afterwards and put into practice. For example, we have foraging workshops throughout the year. For some people, this might bring back memories of foraging as a child, but for others, it might be totally new. Foraging is also something that relies on memory, as it's not always practical to carry a guidebook out in the wild. Perhaps you could start with remembering 1 or 2 edible plants and expand your knowledge over time. But if a group activity isn't for you, we have a number of self-guided walks of the parks with easy to follow maps or activity sheets to take part in or activity sheets you can take out into the parks for both adults and children. You can find these on the Get Involved section of our Parks Trust website, or you can contact us directly by sending an email to info@theparkstrust.com or phoning the office. But you don't need to live in Milton Keynes to get the benefits of these activities. You can care for your memory in very simple ways, such as taking a walk and noticing things along the way. So thank you very much for listening, and thank you to Jitka and Abi for another enlightening podcast. Be sure to check out our previous episodes, and these are available on the Parks Trust YouTube channel.